Welcome to the CG Pro podcast. This is episode 92. And today we have a very special guest, Mr. Ed Ulbrich, who I'll introduce in just a second. If you enjoy the show, sign up for our newsletter and you'll hear more about the shows that we do. And we have a cool new course coming up at CG Pro, the school. AI for Filmmakers starts on Sunday. Come and check it out. So I'm going to bring in today's guest, Mr. Ed Ulbrich, who has a storied career in visual effects, always been on the cutting edge, goes back to the early days of Digital Domain, and is now at Moon Valley, pushing the edge with AI and visual effects and CG. Ed, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Ed. Thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Two Eds are better than one, as they say.
Indeed, indeed.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, and I always love to start out just by asking a little bit about how you got into this. I know that you go back a long way with DD and commercials just before that, but what drew you into this crazy world of CG and VFX? Were there any kind of early inspirations or reasons that made you be here?
Yeah, I think. Well, look, I'm. A lot of people don't know that I'm a classically trained painter. I learned a
Wow.
16th century skill when I went to art school, as it turned out. I have actually ground heavy metal pigments into linseed oil and Damar varnish and gum turpentine to make paint. So
Wow.
that was a whole journey back in the mid and late 80s at the University of Illinois in Champaign, Illinois. And at the same time that was happening, the National Center for Supercomputing was built, NCSA. And another interesting thing happened is they opened up the NCSA to be multidisciplinary. So the School of Art and Design and Architecture was now included with astrophysics and chemistry and so on and so forth. And so I got a job in the visualization department at NCSA. It sort of blew my mind, and it changed everything for me. I was confronted with CGI before it was cool to do CGI. And I remember seeing, it was scientific visualization, seeing people doing gas jet dynamics and fluid simulations, and it just blew my mind. I saw it as art. And that was sort of an interesting pivot for me, because that was when I had to put down the paintbrushes and then move from the 16th century to the 20th century. And I was blown away. And the idea of motion and then animation, it all occurs. It takes a long time for that oil paint to dry to try to animate with that. And I found
talk about rendering.
Yes, exactly. I was the renderer. So that was a really fascinating time. And I came out of university thinking, I'm a fine artist. I want to work with computers and paint. I'm not going to sell it and do commercial art, and I would never do anything like that. And then I learned about what getting an undergraduate degree in fine art means. It means you need to go to graduate school, right? What they teach you is how to be a painter, not how to make a living. And then you become a graduate school, and then you go to graduate school to learn how to become a teacher, right? Well, it was just that was not my path. And so when confronted with starving artist syndrome, it was like, hell no. And I had a very good friend that had gone to work in an ad agency in Chicago and introduced me to some folks. So I get a job at the Leo Burnett agency in Chicago. And as it turns out, I knew a whole lot about something, computer graphics, that had no real practical applications yet in the world. And I was assigned to the Kellogg's account. And I became close personal friends with Tony the Tiger and Snap Crackle Pop and Dig 'em and Toucan Sam and that whole lineup of characters and critters selling packaged sugar. And I got to do my first cell animation. So I started animation from CGI, right? But then you learn about cell animation. I was literally just gobsmacked, blown away about how tedious and slow and painfully long the process was, and how difficult it was to iterate, and how it all looked very improvisational, but it was painstaking, months and months, $1 million to make a Tony the Tiger commercial, and it was just really shocking to me. And then changes, when the executive would say, could Tony get out of the car sooner and then say the line? And you'd watch everyone else just turn white, and then you realize that's another 3 months, right, to get back the pencil test for them to approve. It just really, and I'm like, why aren't you doing this in computers? And everyone's like, what? People are just shocked, like, oh, Oh, that's cute. The kid's talking about making commercials in the computer. Oh, that's fun. That's nice. That's cute. Well, eventually, young, dumb, and cocky, you run your mouth long enough, and then people are like, okay, So towards the end of my time at that agency, we were testing and doing things in CGI, and weirdly, it became a thing, right? In that just short period of time, CGI was a thing. Lucasfilm and Industrial Light and Magic had just done the first CGI in a movie ever. I think it was Ron Howard's Willow. I think fact check that one. I think that's accurate. And so it was suddenly a thing everyone was buzzing about, and it sort of happened to really at scale, more of an advertising thing first. And I was very lucky, super, super lucky. And I got, because something that's suddenly a thing everyone wants to know about. In the agency, I was working directly with the president of Leo Burnett, and we were doing the 20th anniversary or the 25th anniversary, I forget, of Miller Lite. Right, we're doing this big commercial, and the idea was we were going to make the most expensive, mega commercial ever done. And so, who would be the director for this? And James Cameron was my hero, and I'm into sci-fi. That was my thing, and it was all good. And so, Terminator 2 had just come out. And right around that same period of time, you were seeing the Michael Jackson videos with morphing had suddenly entered the zeitgeist. People were not talking about morphing was a word now, and so anyway, we needed a director, and I took a swing, and I met this guy named Scott Ross, who used to work at One Pass Video, and then Scott Ross was now over at Lucasfilm and running Industrial Light and Magic and Lucasfilm, and I'd met him at once, and so I call him like, I need to get a hold of, a major director, trying to get a hold of, and so he was the one who's like, well, I've got Dennis Murin, he's a great visual effects supervisor. I'm like, my creatives, they don't want a visual effects, they want a director. Well, so eventually he's like, well, I need to be George Lucas himself. I'm like, that would do it.
Sure.
That would do it. He said, well, that's not going to happen. And then he came back and said, what about Jim Cameron? And I'm like, well, Jim Cameron's my hero.
Wow.
So he's like, call this guy, right? His agent. This is before, by the way, no computers, no cell phones, no nothing. So I remember going into work that next day, and I'm like, dialing 310. I'm going to call Jeff Berg, one of the gods of Hollywood, who's running, ICM, James Cameron's agent, and I'm 26-year-old kid. I'm like, hello, is this Jeff Berg's office? I get this. What do you want? It was very. I got through, and very long story short, Jim Cameron agrees to direct his first, and I think, as it turns out, his last TV commercial.
Wow.
And but what an exciting thing, and Industrial Light and Magic was our production company, and it was fantastic, amazing experience. And all I ever wanted to do was work at ILM. That was like a dream. And they were doing CGI at full force. We do this very expensive commercial. And long story short, going through that, I was, I'd known Scott now, and Scott was just an amazing guy. And then one day, he's gone. And what happened? He's gone. And then Jim, so this turns into, we're starting a company in Los Angeles. And the rest is history. So shortly thereafter, I moved to LA, without just like, I'm in. Done. It's like, you guys want to negotiate salary? Like, oh, okay, sure, I'm in. Like, I'm in.
I'm in anyway.
And I think like 3 weeks later, I lived in Los Angeles.
Wow.
And that was that. And took a swing, and I didn't know where to. We were working out of Lightstorm Entertainment still. I remember we would joke, Scott and I got to fight over who gets to use the phone or the pencil, because we were sharing a little closet-sized office. And as it turns out, I was living at Venice Beach because we didn't know where the offices were going to be. And as it turns out, our offices were right across the street from the apartment I rented. And that became Digital Domain's headquarters for 20 years in Venice, California. And what an I'm like incredibly blessed, incredibly lucky guy. I went to like the Scott Ross kind of film business school and the Jim Cameron film school, and got to work with some of the most incredible people. And as I tell the stories, even I always tell people, forgive me for the names I'm about to drop, because when back then when we started, they weren't famous, but a lot of these young directors doing TV commercials and music videos have become the gods of Hollywood. And it's been an incredible honor, joy, just pure delight to be a part of that, and see friends, getting big commercials and music videos, and then huge movies, and becoming, household names. And it's just really been an amazing journey. It sort of came out of that early '90s spirit of innovation that Scott really fostered, this kind of rock and roll innovative culture back in those days. And we can kind of come back to this, but it was sad to see, all the industry changed. It became this big thing, and it sort of became something very, very different than what I loved. And so we can get back to this, but where I am now again feels like it did back in the '90s. So we can touch on that. How is AI making this a more intimate creative process? It is. It's cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's clear you've been on that edge and wanting to stay on that edge through your career. Going back to that period, what was it like? I've heard people talk about the early DD years, which I didn't get to experience. Jackie got to experience it some way into that. And what was it? What was it like? What was the spirit of it? It sounds like the pirate ship is described very fondly by everyone I talk to.
Yeah. I had a blast. Now if you would ask me during, I think we are trained, we just sort of forget some of the, stressful and some tough situations and all that stuff. But holistically, you kind of just pull back from it. 20 years. I mean, I had a blast. I met my wife. I have dear, close friends that I've known forever. Everything it is such a key part of me, almost to the point where I think it gets to be unhealthy. Assuming you're someplace for so long, it really becomes a part of you. I would say when I left DD, I experienced something. I assume what it would be like to have phantom limb syndrome. If someone loses a limb, they still imagine it's there. They wake up, and you wake up and you're like, oh God, it's not. You just was such a part of me. But the spirit of innovation was this thing. I give full credit to Scott, and I guess everybody else. He allowed there to be a culture. We called it rock and roll. It was, in many ways. But what was fascinating in those days is there was no such thing as digital artists. That wasn't a term we used. It didn't exist. So, and I'll tell you another thing, and we'll get to this because I remember in the very early days, Jim Cameron took out a full page ad in the back of Variety, and some, unions were, causing overages in movies and other kinds of issues. But he also kind of declared certain things, and he was open about it. All digital, CGI, motion capture, film is dead, all these things, and a lot of people got worked up about that. And I remember coming to work, a few weeks in our new facility in Venice, and there were people picketing us all around the neighborhood.
Really?
Oh, and it wasn't a labor strike. It was just people like pissed. You're going to put model makers and scenic painters and motion control programmers and grips, and you're going to put us all out of work, right? Visual effects, animation, CGI is bad. I've seen this movie before, yes. And we know what happened. That back then there wasn't even the term digital artist. So flash 30 years later, I mean, we created not just digital, but a whole industry exploded out of those early years of hundreds of thousands of jobs for people over that same period of time that didn't exist prior. So we saw this whole explosion. But another thing that we experienced was the industry changed. Those first movies using CGI or a hybrid of CG and physical practical effects, there's really, and clearly, if you look at, Scott keeps track of these stats more than I do, but top 20, I think if you look at the top 30, probably a vast majority of the top 20, 30, 40, 50 movies ever made are all one thing, they're visual effects or animation, right? And we've all heard those stats and stuff. So, but what changed was in the early days, it was very much a director's medium, and directors were very involved in the process. And so we were working very, very closely with amazing filmmakers, helping shape their movies and their ideas and bringing life to what they want to see in their visions. And, they want you on set with them. They're very involved. We had many famous directors, had offices at Digital Domain. And, we would hang out and they would be in the theater. We'd all be with their laser pens doing dailies on film that would be looping and, all that stuff. But there was this magic of we're all doing this for the first time, and we're just sheer force of willing this into existence. And you're so part of it that you become emotionally invested. You have ownership in the project. That was wonderful. It was hard, a lot of hard work. It was really wonderful. There's a lot of times we don't know how we're going to do this, but we're going to figure it out. sheer innovation. Where those creative problems touch technology, that spark, that is that innovation. And it is super addictive for me at least. And there was a culture at DD where I'd say it was super addictive. People still, I think, we got off on that. That's a big thing, that driving things forward, these plateaus, these next levels. So yeah, super, super exciting times. And if I just segue to now, everyone's, AI is this thing that happened in the last 2 or 3 years. No. Now, back in 2005 or 2006 at Digital Dominion, we didn't call it AI because people would have laughed at us, I think. They wouldn't have been afraid. They would think we're crazy. But it was machine learning and computer vision. And it was all around how to create characters. So there was this, back with the spirit of innovation. We had this movie, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. That was a real head scratcher. And I would say that it was really, just having bold and crazy ideas. I would say David Fincher gets as much credit as anybody in terms of helping shape the technology and the various techniques we would use to realize that movie, and his courage to do so. And Frank Marshall and Kathy Kennedy, that it was only going to work if the character worked. And so that was this through sheer force of will, creating the first use of machine learning and computer vision to capture a real-time performance of Brad in this case, and imbue his performance onto his AI aged, shrunken, reversed aged digidouble. And what a breakthrough. That was such an amazing thing. And particularly when it worked, then we're like, okay, now we're cooking. And that methodology and that basic technical approach has lasted until today. You're still seeing movies using that same, a little bit better code and some faster CPUs and things like that, but it's basically the same approach from a CGI perspective. And at the same time, I know that it was comparatively to where we are, it was still hundreds of people, and it was, every step of the way, fantastic, amazing, and fun and rewarding and satisfying that we were doing. But there was nothing easy, quick, inexpensive about it whatsoever. It was a massive endeavor. Super. The movie got an Academy Award, many Academy Awards. The visual effects got an Academy Award. That was brilliant. Very, very, very satisfying. And I look back at it today, and it's like, some of the time has not been so kind, right? Particularly now that we've seen things advance substantially since then. And I would say only until recently, I would say the holy grail of the human face and a soul behind it, is elusive. But I don't know so much if that's true anymore. So that thing that was once the hardest thing to do is not really the hardest thing to do anymore.
Right.
And so there's now new things. So, yeah.
It's interesting because a lot of the huge advances that have happened in our society or species, if you like, have been around solving huge problems. Talking about AI, going back to Turing's definition of it, that was solving a giant problem that the world had, trying to crack the Enigma code and be able to stop a war. And then a huge problem there that people needed to solve. Lots of the big innovations have happened through big problems to solve. What was it like at the beginning of that movie, beginning of Benjamin Button, when people were talking about doing something that had never been done before, and obviously producers start getting twitchy around things that haven't been done before, and because they want some certainty, and people want certainty. What was it like, the conversation around bringing that certainty to people that you were gonna get through it?
Well, it was, to be honest, super nerve-wracking. Moments of terror and self-loathing.
And
what have we done? And can we actually do this? We have a good working theory. We've seen various tests that have given hope. We have not actually done this yet. So that is a bit of a leap. Much more comfortable making these leaps nowadays because, this is how things get but I would say also along that journey, Benjamin Button as a film had been around for, 50 years. Many directors, in fact, I've talked about this a lot at Digital Dominion. David Fincher finally figured it out and cracked it and was able to get this movie made. But, 6, 7, 8 years earlier, Ron Howard had it. And back then we didn't have the machine learning and the computer vision and so the idea of keyframing that, it was just not feasible. And so there's, and other directors and other directors and other, been around for a long time. If you want to make this short story into a film, really just the conceit of the story is what makes it so challenging that it wasn't possible. And so that moment, that spirit of innovation is what flipped that. But I will tell you, along the way, even with Fincher, I remember getting a call from David one night, and he was like, "That's it. It's dead. The stake is through the heart. The head is cut off. Benjamin Button will never be made. It's over." It's like, how? I mean, we're so close. We're so close. It's like they're basically saying that there were two studios at the time, and co-financing one international, one and domestic, and it was like, unless they can see what you say, a CG person doing this, they're not going to take the chance. It's because it's all riding. The whole movie's riding on that, and we've never seen it before. And it sounds good, but we got to see it. And so it was like, well, that'll never. So we did a test, and the idea, and this started a long history of this, of prototyping. If we can show the prototype, you de-risk. It's like, see, it works. And so we had enough theory and enough, we had hypotheses of how it might work, and we tried enough things that we did this test, this proof of concept, which obviously it worked. The movie was greenlit, and we knew that we maybe demonstrated 20% of what we would need to actually do for the movie. We didn't have to make it. We just basically made a little CG old man, replaced a person's face or head with a CG head. We took it through the methodology, but it's just one shot. It does not hold up for an entire film. So we still didn't know, will this work for the entire film? How will this go, right? But we had enough of a test that we know, okay, well, at least we know from a rendering perspective, he's going to look like he's in the shot. He'll look real. But the performance part, we're just like, we think, we hope, we think it should work. And it'll work. It'll be probably going to work. I'm pretty darn sure this is going to work. And then it worked. And then it was like, oh, okay, we can retarget this performance that he's doing in real time onto this thing. And it's very easy. Yeah, that was when it was like, oh, okay, that's all going to happen. But along the way, there were many challenges. There were people that didn't believe. There were some things that didn't work, in retrospect, like, well, good thing that didn't work, because we ended up doing it this other way, and this is really the way forward. And so lots of luck all woven in there at the same time as well. But by the end of it, a lot of people don't know this. I mean, we were, it was done on time, and I would even say slightly under budget, which is miraculous for the virgin flight of using machine learning, computer vision to create a character, let alone Brad Pitt. Yeah, it worked out.
Yeah, well, it's hard. Humans are hard, so hard, because we know so intuitively what they're supposed to look like, and with a big movie star, everyone knows what Brad Pitt looks like, and
yes.
even more. What was that moment like then when you saw the first test come back from the prototyping phase pre-green light, where you saw it? Like, what was that like?
Massive relief.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to get run out of town. We're not going to get tarred and feathered. It did what we said it would do. Thank God. It was just like, yeah, relief, and then quickly sobered by the, oh shit, now we actually have to do this.
Yeah.
Now it has to work at scale, right? So that was the other challenge. But it was also, for the team, enormously uplifting, right? Everybody knew. I remember, you see people's faces even. You're onto something. Like, this is working. It's working really well, to the point where people are showing tests every day. We're like, oh, it works, and that was immensely satisfying. And then immediately, you're starting to think of all the other applications, right? We're making, but we could do all these other things now that aren't making someone old and small, but stunts and digital doubles and face replacements that are typically very expensive and very difficult and don't honestly look so good. This really is like a big a big game changer in that regard. Of course, we look at that today as tediously expensive and painfully slow, but at the time that was a breakthrough. So yeah, it's all a matter of
possibility. Yeah.
Yes.
So, and different people have different perspectives. So like a producer would feel relief, and an artist would feel wonder and magic. And like an artist producer, which is, I guess, maybe how you could partly describe you, probably felt both.
Possibly. Oh yeah, for sure. I guess I've always Yeah, I mean, I would say I always feel like in my career, somehow along the way, I ended up going through the left door instead of the right door, or the right door instead of the left door, and there was this. I ended up as an executive. But I tell people, even my current company, everywhere I've worked since, it's like, so I speak fluent suit and I can
Right.
pass, and the business people don't know, but I don't identify as a suit. I learned a 16th century skill. I paint, right? So it's
Yeah.
to me, and having done it, I learned on Wavefront Alias, right? I remember I learned how to write shaders in the early primitive days of the earliest RenderMan. Um, that I still, even though I don't, that's not directly applicable to what I'm doing now. It is painting, early CGI. There is a vocabulary that we all have that I find is entirely relevant in CGI, which is the ability to use language to describe things explicitly, which happens to also be the language of physics and CGI, right? So often, how we're describing things is in the in terms of CG and physics. So that's absolutely applicable right now in AI. Again, the ideas and those concepts. And the other thing I appreciate the most is, when we talk about AI, I hear this all the time about AI is going to democratize creativity. No, I'm sorry. It just makes me, that's just sickening. It's not going to happen. Sorry. And I've said this, it's not going to make you a better artist. It's just not. Most people are not artists, right? It's not going to make you one. It's going to make whatever you're doing look really good, but it's not going to make you a better artist. I do think it will democratize production, right? That much is true. Access. You have access to AI, which is much more accessible than a large global visual effects facility, right? You
Yeah.
need a
Very
whole lot of
complicated.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
complicated. So,
And skill and
in many
talent.
ways,
Yeah.
we're seeing this new AI scene sort of more disrupting maybe the need to aggregate in a building, even more so than the pandemic may have, where people can become like small departments. Uh, there'll be a lot of adaptation, but I'm always reminded of when digital domain was picketed
Yeah.
32 years ago. An industry emerged from that when
So
the
what
people
do
were
you
there saying you're going to destroy it.
what do you think that we can learn from that, having seen that directly and gone through that? What do you think we can learn from that period to more gracefully move through this period?
Um, I think I think obviously my hindsight's perfect, right?
Yeah.
Old, so but I would say, yeah, fine. It's just digital domain again. Fear is not an option. That was our first T-shirts. I think fear is not an option.
That's cool.
And you can look at it. You don't. I look at this. It's just a matter of perspective, and it's identical to 32 years ago. It's either you can, yes, there's some new technology, right? You look at the cotton gin and electricity and the car. This is going to change. It's going to change a lot. This is a big one. And it's a choice. You can continue to just look down, and you're going to get run over, and you can be the victim, and you can, like, it's going to replace us all. You will probably be replaced, right? You might not make it over, but you could also jump over and lean in, and go for it. And there's enormous opportunity on that side. It's just a choice. So I look at this as, AI is not something that's being done to Hollywood. It's not being done to the advertising industry. It's not being done to, it is something that exists. And, if you harness it, it can be done for the visual effects industry, not to the visual effects industry, just like
Right.
CGI, right? I mean, that was a big changeover, but we've all seen these other, kind of seismic shifts as we've gone along the way. I remember, motion capture. Wow. I mean, in some parts, that was just high treason. That's cheating, right? Let's go back to, I believe, in fact, check me on this one. I think it was 1983 or 1984. As the story goes, the original movie Tron, was up for an Academy Award, or wanted to be up for an Academy Award, but wasn't allowed, didn't qualify because it was considered using a computer was cheating to
Right.
make a movie. Right. Well, we know a lot has changed. So, yeah, I see where we are today very much through that same lens. And there's a lot of, people running out their hair on fire and panicking and all that stuff. I've seen that before too. Um, I'm also seeing, young people and older people and white-haired people lean in and do some interesting, amazing things. Obviously, I've leaned in all the way. I'm all in, but
Yeah.
I see this as a continuum, as an extension. This is an obvious place where it hands off, and I think it's fascinating. I think the response to it is fascinating. What people are doing now is fascinating. I think this is an opportunity. I think it's a massive opportunity. I think it's I think for visual effects artists, this could be a new renaissance. Everything for me goes back to digital domain. Scott tried to start the digital renaissance. He did in many ways. Digital domain really it was a movement at one point, and I would say we are now at a place where I see a movement about AI, and there's controversy even within AI, but I see it as sort of at this point, it's inevitable. It's in everything. Uh, I've seen some really amazing stuff. I've seen some incredible things that people can do with it. I've seen some amazing artists do some amazing things, which I think it'll be interesting to see more of that. To me, this is a logical extension of the same trajectory we've been on.
So what would you recommend to people going into this, again, having seen during that period of that transition from practical to digital, seeing people resist, seeing people protest, seeing some people jumping in? How did the people fare through that? What made people succeed, whether they were artists or companies during that phase versus not succeed?
Fearlessness, conviction, um, a culture of excellence, a camaraderie around all of the above, where people are bonding just because we are innovating. So and it's intoxicating. You're seeing results quickly and things that are dramatic. That's fun stuff. Yeah, I don't know if that answered
I,
your question, but
yeah, definitely, in a really cool way. You led with personal qualities, which I think is really, really foundational and important, as opposed to thinking you should go learn this tool or learn that model. You led with like individual personal qualities, and
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think that's it. The technology is changing so fast that I have three daughters, and one's in college, one's going to be going into college soon, one's just getting out. So it's super, super top of mind, and I'm really lucky that I've gotten to work with some of the local universities, and but you start to think about like, what do you teach? And I find things are changing so fast, so fast. I find like if you're going to go to a university or a school and learn how to work a piece of gear, I just don't, that it's more vocational training. That's very temporary. I even tell my kids, by the time you graduate, whatever gear or software you're learning now, in 4 years, I guarantee it will be, it's just things are just changing so rapidly right now. It's exciting, but it's more about like, what do you teach, and I think it's
what's your
that
opinion?
how to see. It's the eye,
Yeah,
like teach painting, teach drawing, right?
16th century
Teach
painting, grinding
teach.
the metal up into,
I don't know if you need to do that, but I
yeah.
do think just understanding, the foundational, the fundamentals, volume, shading, lighting, reflections, refractions, learn some physics. It's still there's still so much to learn how to tell a story, what creates tension in a shot, in a scene, how to make somebody, smile or chuckle or laugh or cry with no words, right? Or things like that. Those are things that have nothing to do with, the tactile, those are filmmaking, this is all here. That's what we need. And then I think whatever the tools become, if you're so inclined, you're going to learn them, or you're going to work with other people who know how to use them to work towards a common vision. But have the vision and know what it should look like. That to me is what it's all about. And then if that's our North Star, then I don't see the world in terms of, there's these epochs that end, and then there's this new one that starts, and the other one stops. Um, I would say for the foreseeable future, 3, 5 years, we're going to be living in a hybrid world of CGI and AI together, because it works. It makes sense. You get great stuff. I have no lust to say we're only going to use AI. Like, why?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm only going to paint with this brush and these 4 colors. Well, that's very limiting. Like, why wouldn't I? What am I trying to prove? I'm just making art. Like, I just need to use the right tools. So these are more tools. They do some very powerful things, but they're going to unlock a lot of creativity. So yeah,
That's
I
amazing.
think
Yeah. Foundations.
yeah, exactly.
The fundamentals. And it's something which is really important to us in the training side of CG Pro, is to teach it, because tools change. I worked through one revolution of virtual production where everybody was using Unity. Now everybody uses Unreal Engine for the 3D version of that. If you get fixed around a tool, you go out of date. If you understand what's going on underneath, the foundations,
Right.
the fundamentals.
That's right.
And I love that you brought up the traditional practices, because I think a lot of people feel that they should learn the modern version of it and skip all of that. But people who've spent time in the darkroom or grinding metal into pigment have, I think, for me, it becomes the amount of time that you have to spend doing that you focus on what you're doing, and the patience and the concentration and the it forces you to think about what you're doing and meditate on it, rather than just firing things out and selecting from what was produced. But it's really cool to hear you describe it in that way. We have a question that's come through from the audience here. Someone's asking about the visual effects industry, saying the VFX industry still hasn't recovered from pandemic, writers, actors strikes, etc. Do you think AI has anything to do with the slowness we're still seeing in productions picking up? Are productions starting to evaluate their AI options and weighing those versus traditional VFX pipelines?
Well, there's a lot there.
Yeah,
That's a
8 questions.
series of questions.
Yeah.
So do I think? I mean, okay. So do I think that AI has anything to do with the slowness we are seeing in productions picking back up? No. I don't see that. I see economics. I see that the strike and the pandemic weighed heavily on those economics, but I also saw the strike create a boom cycle like we've never seen before. A boom cycle so massive that there was so much business that we forgot that there aren't enough animators and visual effects artists to do the work. And we saw that happening during the pandemic. So this boom cycle that just exploded because we had nothing to do but stay at home and watch television. And then boop, it popped. Right. And then we went the other direction. And then it starts to come back, and then boop, it pops because now there's this pesky strike. So I don't think that I think the pandemic slowed everything down, but I think the result of that was pent up backlog needing for content, and it exploded. We saw this massive growth swing, boom in the other direction, that then went in the other direction with a strike. But I think what's really going on is there's an enormous amount of economic pressures on the Hollywood ecosystem, really on the entire economy, but on the Hollywood ecosystem in particular. And there's several things that are contributing to that. There's things like, the goose that laid the golden egg for so long is like ad-supported broadcast and cable television, right? Well, now they're streaming, except there's only one company, dominating in streaming, and that's still Netflix. And there's a lot of companies still losing a lot of money on streaming, but they know they have to do it. And so that's real. And that's a real burden on studios. And then when you basically have a shutdown on top of that, right? Not good. So it puts even more pressure on the system. And then you have, you're seeing cable and television and broadcast, being spun out and things separate. It's a super challenging time. And so you're trading out one business in a way for another, but it's putting financial hardship. And then a strike exacerbates all of that massively. And now you come out of it. And what I think has happened is the headline is, ooh, the evil AI boogeyman's going to get you. But the reality is a bunch of people completely out of work, right? Well, that might have been some things that we're fighting about. There's also just getting paid. There's also some things worth fighting about, but everything paused. It wasn't because AI took everyone's job, it's because we were worried about it and it was a negotiating chip and there were all these other things to negotiate as well. That got resolved, the strike resolves, but now there's enormous, hardship on the studio infrastructure, on the studio system because of a strike, because of changing viewing consumption habits. Box office was, massively diminished during the pandemic. It starts to come back. Now it goes back down again. Deep kind of existential threats that I would argue on the periphery was the sensationalism of the AI boogeyman, but there are much deeper, more generational, like big issues underneath all this, which still exist. So now I would say all of those economic, in my view, all these economic pressures on the studios, which are real, on the entire ecosystem, which are very, very real, is quite honestly pushing people to AI as a solution.
Yeah.
Right. With the hope that it's going to somehow save us all this money, which I happen to believe it will save quite a bit of money, but not necessarily in the ways that people are thinking. We talk to producers, studio executives, even mostly producers, coming to us like, these movies are costing $150 million, but with AI, we want to make them for $2 million. And we're like, well, best of luck to you. Good luck. Let us know how that goes.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just not reality based at all. And so they're thinking there's some magic tech. You can just, boop, I'll hit the AI button. I think AI is becoming a verb too. Well, can't you just AI that? Right. We get that a lot now too. No, I'm sorry. It's going to save money. There's no question. We're seeing it. It would be hard not to, but not. It's. I think over time it will start to save money. But I've also seen this for my entire career, as Jackie knows. Particularly, every fiscal year you go through a planning season, and we're looking at all the new tools and technology we need to have, and we've got people making impassioned. But if we get this new version of this thing, it's going to save us so much money. I've heard that every year for as long as I've been doing this. And then you're like, okay, well, so-and-so is very good because it's faster, it does this. And they have all these stats. And then you go through the year and it's like, this isn't saving us any money because you didn't stay at the same level that you were operating at then. You've now taken all this extra headroom you've got with this new tech, and now you're doing new, more advanced things. So we're back where we were. We're not saving any money, and now you're doing even more complex things.
Right.
And so you go round and round and round like that. So, yeah, I think that will some with AI, we're pushing it, but I think right now, foreseeable future, it's hybrid. This lives inside visual effects studios. It's not. It does not do everything. It does not do everything. There are certain things I would argue that you will try with AI. It may even take longer than doing it in a traditional way. There are other things where that won't be the case for sure. But I do find it, at this point, sort of inevitable. It's here.
Right. We had a similar kind of thread through virtual production, and people said all the same kinds of things about that technology, whether it was LED or not, being able to make filmmaking cheaper, being able to.
I never
ultimately does. No, it didn't transpire either.
You would have never heard me saying that. Yeah, and you would never have heard me say that then.
But there was the similar sort of narrative from the outside or from certain people looking to it for that, as opposed to thinking about this is a new thing we can do. This is creating extra capacity, new capability, which is what you're talking about. You create new capability and then you move into that. And then because of competition, perhaps everybody expects that new level. So then therefore you are at that new edge. It doesn't necessarily save you money, but it can, as you say.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We have another question here saying, incredible work you've all done at Moon Valley. What do you see as the industry standard down the line? Well, industry standard in a moment like this.
That's a big one. I think it's a little early to call standards.
Yeah.
I will say this. And I'm going to say this is from my own personal views, which happen to sync up nicely with the company's, but my personal views is why I'm at the company. I see as a standard, as a goal, I'm a big believer in copyright. I am a big believer that you and I, and probably most of the people that are listening or watching to this, make our livings because there is copyright, right? If we are in any form of creative field, in any kind of media entertainment, it is copyright that allows us all to be and enjoy this life, and our abilities to monetize art and creativity. Full stop. Period. Without that anarchy, you can't make a living. I just don't see it. So, um, when I was prior to Moon Valley, I was at a company called Metaphysic. Coming out of the pandemic, we were doing AI from the shoulders up, and our best to do it ethically in a clean way with consent, licensed training data, so on and so forth. But there were still a bunch of naysayers. We were trying to raise money. We believed that there needs to be, larger video models, foundational models that are clean. We just couldn't, the investment community was not having it. It was just not and I was stunned and surprised to see investors putting money into platforms where, and for me, that's not a moral thing. It's just like, how will you do business? You're these are things that are trained on, the internet without consent. And so for me, it's like, I don't believe you can. It's very difficult to sell that to a studio for a whole host of reasons. And so for me, I saw that as like, well, you could make TikToks, you could make post social media, but that's not my goal. And so I was just struck by why isn't nobody doing this? Why won't people invest in clean, licensed models where we're not stealing people's IP? And I'm fully confessed super nerdy guy. I follow rock guitarists and I follow AI developers. And when you see a group of AI developers leaving DeepMind, that doesn't happen, right? These are the top people. And so when you hear of late 23 or so, there was a group that left DeepMind and they formed this company, Moon Valley. Okay, well, that's interesting. And then Moon Valley announces their strategy is to make a clean model. Well, now they have my attention. This is significant. You've got some of the biggest minds in generative AI leaving, and they see it, a clean model. And the other thing I found super exciting was the next move was they acquire a company called Asteria Film Co. And I did not know Asteria, but Asteria, as I got to know them, it's think analog filmmakers, documentarians, proper, true filmmakers, but that had kind of flipped into AI. And there was a team of applied AI artists and developers in this company, Asteria, playing with all these different tools, seeing where does this go, where does this move forward, how can we start to create films and animation using these things in a hybrid environment, all these same ideas. And so what is Asteria doing? What is Moon Valley doing buying that company? It's brilliant. I know this from my whole life in visual effects. When we would develop tech, like in our pipeline group and our software with our developers, those demos in a controlled laboratory environment are amazing. Woo, look at that. That's a cool, slick demo. Wow, that's great. Now you try to use that tool, that product, and it doesn't work. It looks good, great demo, not a product, not a tool, not something you can actually deploy on a production. And that's a very difficult thing to hone. And so the idea of them having this flywheel where there's actually artists and applied AI people on the front end of this, taking these tools as they're being made and banging on them to make things, and then giving the feedback back to the developer saying, this tool sucks, or this would be great, but could you also do, or is there a different version of the, and that feedback loop leads to now tools that artists can use and that artists want to use because it's informed by artists. Brilliant. So, for me, that was super exciting. Of course, then I get to meet these folks. I get to see what they're doing. I'm gobsmacked, blown away. Everything that we ever hoped, full frame, full AI, but they were leaning into this in a very different way than I heard anybody else speak of. It was the idea of we are making tools for visual effects artists and animators, which is different than we're an AI company making an AI model. We're a company making tools, AI powered. So these are visual effects artist tools, animator artist tools. They're just powered with thermonuclear fusion. And that to me was exciting, because the other thing I'd seen, I just came from this space, like this prompting thing. To me, I believe this. If you try to prompt a movie, one of two things are going to happen first. You're either going to go mad, or the director will kill you, right? Because it's just that is not, I can only imagine like David Fincher's words when you're giving notes on a shot. Like, great, I want to tilt the camera 2 degrees down and then rotate nodally to the left. I want the glint, to hit the edge of the rim here and cause this flare as the person, by 32 frames. On the 33rd frame, we do, he's just, the notes are explicit. The guy knows exactly what he wants. And as you're going to prompt that, I mean, that poor artist, it's just not a tool. But when you give tools 3D cameras, right, and keyframing and all these ways of bringing shots to life, now and I will tell you, this is what the irony of this thing is. We have there's kind of the AI native community, young people, and some of them get our tool like it's really hard to use. Like, it's built for digital artists, right? Less so for folks making TikToks in mom's basement, right? It takes skill, right? It isn't just a prompt and pray. You have to know what you're doing. But in those hands, it's fantastic. And that's where the cool thing is, to say you put these tools where, every visual effects artist understands timeline editing. They understand the ideas of compositing. They understand the ideas of lighting. And so if you have all that, what it should look like. You have the eye. What makes a good shot. How to tell a story. These are tools now that sort of take all that friction out of that. And it is amazing. Look, I'm super lucky. I saw this at Metaphysics. I'm now witnessing it daily at Moon Valley. You're seeing great artists coming from a different discipline using these tools. It is magic. And if you're just observing, you're not thinking about what software people are using, it looks just like visual effects. It looks like everything I've ever known. It's teams of people coming together making things. They're just doing mind-bogglingly complex things that with the old tools, you would never gotten that far, because no one's going to spend that kind of money for most of this stuff, right? So it's very freeing, and it's freeing to iterate. You can iterate. You have to worry about all the versions because the costs are so low and it's so quick. And so I feel like, I was saying, like, back in those days, the visual effects process, you're very intimate. You're in that theater. You're on the set. The director's doing walkthroughs with you, desk to desk. Artists are all part of this, and then that turned into global factory work.
Yep.
Right. I never wanted to work in a factory, let alone run a factory. That just, if someone had written that down and told me to open up in my future life, like, I'm going to run factories, hell no, that's not going to. Never. It happened. And I realized, like, this just took what I love and kind of ruined it, right? You don't even meet the director. You don't even meet the producers. They're in another continent, right? There's 1,000 people working on this movie in 4 continents, right? You'll never have that interaction. You'll never have that community. You'll never have that, it just became this decentralized, kind of deconstructed process. It was all about chasing rebates and low-cost labor. And that was really, like, that was a sad, like, wow, it's just getting harder and harder. And the art is being just stripped away from this. And that, so here we are. And now we're using AI, and we're back into this where the directors, they want to see it. They want to get involved. So, I could, a year ago, 2 years ago, you couldn't beg a director to come into a visual effects company. Yeah. Now they're calling us. Can we see? Can you show us? Could we do? Would this work? There's this hunger. There's this desire. Even during the strike, there were many studios that wouldn't meet with us. This was at Metaphysics. It was like, we can't be seen fraternizing with the AI people. I literally was told that we cannot be seen fraternizing with the AI people.
Yeah.
Right.
I bet.
But meanwhile, quietly, secretly, then they're like, psst, could we come to your office? Could we come and see?
1 in the morning.
Your office. And so, yeah, exactly. So all these kind of clandestine meetings. But the directors, the production designers, casting directors, right? We're getting, all these different department heads that you would never think, the hair and makeup people coming in to learn about AI and to see how, and I have seen now AI being used on multiple films, and I've watched it being used in the makeup trailer, and I've watched it in the costume shop, and I've even seen the AI, the AD department, even thinking about shoot days. because of things that AI can help with. That's pretty remarkable. And now those are still rarefied, but I think the issue, as I've seen this and as I see it today, is there's still this kind of threshold issue, aside from public sentiment and some of the fear mongering and the overall just the strike of it all. There's still some very powerful stuff here that does some amazing things, and I believe in many ways don't necessarily eliminate entire categories of jobs, and maybe even enhance other ones. But I see that still. I mentioned hybrid. I think I'm seeing this every day. And, CG artists sitting next to AI artists working together on the same thing. I've seen now CGI is like the best friend of AI and vice versa.
Yeah.
I've seen by putting these two things together, unlocking unbelievable power in that you can do massively complicated things in a fraction of the time without long renders that you could do previously. So it does make the artist experience as a creative go quicker, and therefore is more satisfying because you don't have these 24 hours of frame renders you've got to deal with. But that's I think 3D is we call it substrate. It's the perfect substrate to cast AI upon, right? And it gives us this consistency throughout shots and throughout sequences and throughout scenes and throughout movies by having this solid kind of base substrate underneath. I've seen amazing things with with Unreal, even the ability to quickly just change a grayscale clay render model of a character doing something, a walk cycle, and literally in a minute now we have an AI, and that was photoreal, right? So you're almost using both for what they're great for. You can do these very complex renders that would normally bring a visual effects studio to its knees, and you're using the Unreal Engine that automates so much of the animation process because you can do things so quickly in real time. Even you put these two things together, there's something significant there, right? And there's something for everybody still to do. So I think it's cool. I think it's also this accelerator. Things get done faster. I'm watching it happen. Things are getting done in remarkably short periods of time. Still a bunch of people, but just lasts a lot less time. And so the theory is, even in the early days where it's still inefficient and will be relatively slow in 2 years, like I remember 2 years ago how slow it was. It's still, orders of magnitude faster than what we currently have in traditional rendering. But I think in this hybrid world, as we go forward for the next couple of years, the next several years even, I think you're going to start to see more of what I'm seeing, in a micro version of this is there are artists who are flowing back and forth between 3D and AI seamlessly, right? And that's really cool to see because that's where we see just a big unlock of creative power, is being able to harness both of these things.
I'm with you. You're looking at one. I'm very, very interested in the conversation because I think it helps a lot of the people that are afraid of AI replacing everything, and instead thinking about it in those terms. And any one of us who've worked in visual effects know that the words are, as my friend John Brennan said, too low resolution. It's not enough information to be able to express the idea, and you need more input. If you just speak to a team of world-class artists, they're never going to give you what you want if you just talk to them. So what do? You do it visually. You communicate visually, and what you're describing is communicating visually to the AI and being able to have control over it, and it's constraining it. I did a graph the other day for a class I was doing, which had control and complexity on the axes. If you want more control, it gets more complicated. But if you don't want the control, you can make the TikTok video. If you do want the control, you have to lean into what we're used to a little bit.
That's right. And that spirit of innovation. Because I would say even with these most incredibly advanced tools, the innovation almost happens at the artist level. We call it, it's really, we were talking about methodologies. I've got a friend called Phil Peterson, who's a brilliant technologist who has I steal it all the time, but technicology, right? So there's a lot of technicology. And in some ways, I think these are replacing methodologies because the methodology is going, well, it'll be some CGI and it will be some AI. But how that happens, it's workflows. And so this is sort of a new thing where we're seeing the new visual effects methodology will be more about workflowology, if that makes sense. Of how do we stitch these things together to get a certain result that may be different, sequence to sequence, shot to shot, movie to movie. And so these workflow ideas are really fascinating. It's innovating at a shot, scene, or sequence level of how we're going to make this. Which
it's problem solving.
It's
problem solving is using the right tool for the right problem.
Right. That's right. Absolutely.
And there's echoes of virtual production here as well, with talking the things that you've described in filmmakers wanting to get closer to VFX artists. They got further and further apart over the productization phase of VFX, but virtual production brought them back together again. I was on set on The Lion King watching the CG artists and the director working together, and they were playing. It was more like play.
Yes. I appreciate you cited that reference as virtual production. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just like that one. I appreciate, because that's when I think of virtual production. I think of Lion King. I think of Jungle Book. I don't think of LED volumes.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I mean, the real-time render speed is what gets the attention, but the real-time collaboration is what the real value was and is in that. And it's becoming a fantastic way of working with an AI in being able to do those things, because you want control over a camera. Do you want to use a slider or describe it? No, you want to use a camera. You want to use a physical object.
Absolutely.
It's exciting.
I mean, it is very exciting. I've seen, even live inference of AI on set, right? We were doing that when I was at Metaphysic. You look up and you see, 67-year-old Tom Hanks, and on the playback monitor, he's 20. And you look up, that is 1-to-1, amazing. And I think now we're doing full video, full frame. I think we're going to start to see, I think the gaming industry is going to go through a renaissance and a whole explosion of new creativity there as well. I think so many of the things that Kim Libreri, I just think back, even when he was at Digital Domain, we were having the early conversations of AI around the Benjamin Button days. And he was talking about things like when we'll be able to write, the cat jumps off the table and goes to the door. And then it's going to be like all these, kind of prompt-based machine learning. It's all happened. We're seeing it happen. And I think, this renaissance continues. I think it continues into games. And it's really a matter of compute, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that we were seeing live generative AI on set, albeit it was just from the shoulders up, it looks damn good, and it's there, and you buy it, and you feel it. It's that good. Now we move to full generative video, right? That's here, and it's getting better, it's getting faster, it's getting more accurate, all those types of things. So now think about these game worlds. You've got beloved IP that is bigger than all of Hollywood combined, right? In some of these games, really significant, massive global fan bases that experience these things every day. Well, just like we can make a real-time photoreal face of a person in real time, being driven by a real-time feedback of a very complex thing, the human face. I have no question in my mind that we're going to be doing, full interactive game experiences in latent space, in AI. That's with all your favorite game characters, but in a way that we've never even dreamt possible. I think the holodeck is near also. It's an actual thing coming soon.
I'm with you. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating seeing it unfold, because we got no choice but than to witness it and try and be a part of it if we care about it.
Be a part of it.
Yeah.
Shape it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. What advice would you give to people in kind of wrapping up, to maybe the community that we come from, the visual effects community, and also to people who are starting out?
I would say this: never be comfortable. Don't rest. There's so much to learn. There's so much to do. It is very exciting. I would say, Scott Ross, fear is not an option, right? You can choose. It's a choice. You can be disrupted or you can disrupt. You can learn something new. You can extend and expand. in a way that doesn't replace but amplifies. And I'm seeing it. It's a choice. I would say education is everything. Um, I'm really
Thank you for
heartened to
saying that.
see people. Well, look, we should talk. We'll talk off
For
air.
sure.
But education is essential in this for everybody. I think for executives, I think for creatives, I think for storyboard artists, for visual effects artists, for animators, for hair and makeup people. For there's so much now that you can harness to amplify what you bring to the filmmaking experience, even just in ideation, right? Really exciting, really, really exciting. I'm a big fan in a clean model. I think getting all departments firing around a clean model and creating bespoke art that we train on, or working within franchise IP that we train on to make these things, very, very exciting. Um, I think using, and we lean into this, something we do with Moon Valley. We have a bunch of tools, 3D cameras and keyframing, tie frame, but you may have other tools you're already using, right? Use those. We welcome that too. And we can use APIs and ways that we can hook these two things together. If you prefer using a Maya camera to our camera, great, use the Maya camera. Like it's all good. Like this doesn't replace everything. It sits alongside, right? And what we're seeing too is a lot of visual effects studios, a lot of animation companies, they're all using it differently to do different things within their workflows and different things within their pipelines. And then eventually they're like, oh, wow, it does this, but it also does that. We can do both of these things, So eventually, organically, it takes its own shape. It's the early days. It's super fun. Education. Learn about the ideas and principles of AI and how it works. Try different tools. Try different platforms. It's important to know. Even if you're an executive, it's going to up your game. I think in terms of how you look at projects, there's the habit. I've done this for a long time, and anytime a movie's going to get made, immediately, the first default is the live action view of the world. We're going to come here and everything we're going to shoot. That's a set, that's a location, that's a set, that you do all those things. And then usually and there's a budget for the overall movie. So the budget for visual effects is the total budget minus the cost for physical production and post. That's what's left for visual effects, right? Meanwhile,
The scraps.
right? That ends up being one of the biggest parts of the whole movie. And I think, educate yourself, learn these tools. I think we're going to see this paradigm shift. The other interesting thing is that AI doesn't necessarily respect the boundaries of visual effects.
Yep.
Right. And so I also see in live action people thinking about new ways and looking at this as a tool. Like, we can get this movie made. It's just how we make it. And there's different ways to get to a result. Let's design a solution. Let's engineer a solution that delivers the creative that we want, as opposed to defaulting to tradition. Because I think tradition really is, in many ways, the enemy of innovation. Well, it's how we've always done it. Well, we're just going to go, it's habit, right? That doesn't mean there's another way to do it, and maybe you can get a better result. So
that's part of the thing that encouraged me from an old culture into living in California. Right there.
Yeah. There you go.
being able to be open-minded and leaning into it. Yeah. Staying hungry. The only time in my career where I ever thought about whether I enjoyed it anymore was when I got too comfortable. It was literally exactly that. And growing and challenging myself more is what brought me back. So I definitely resonate with that personally, deeply. Well, this is a very, very inspiring conversation for me, and hopefully for others, I'm sure. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience? Any places people can follow what you're doing, or things to check out? Obviously, check out Moon Valley.
Check out Moon Valley, yes. Give us a call. Play with it. Experiment. Learn. Explore. Think of new ways to use it. Come up with new techniques. Try it, mixing it with CGI. Love that. I'm excited. It's easy to get caught up in all the doom and gloom. I do think that, we have economic conditions and situations that are upon us all, but there are some solutions, and they're pretty cool. And one version of it is we're going to just start making things for a lot cheaper, and we won't need people. I would argue we're going to get more opportunities to make things because it won't cost as much. They won't be as precious. I'm hopeful that studios and producers will start to take chances again because the cost pressures will not be as high. A lot of films that would have been made 25, 30 years ago that don't ever get made anymore will get made again. Obviously there's the stories that there's the movies I make, then there's the movies I watch. And usually they're very different. And so I think some of those films that should be seen, at a greater scale that don't now have a chance, right? Because they're not going to cost as much. So I still think there's something in it for everybody that cares and is passionate about creativity. Use it, take advantage of it, explore, push, go, be hungry. Thank you.
What a wonderful soundbite to end on. I share your enthusiasm, and I think in a time like this, there's a lot to be excited about. There's definitely fear. To me, those two things usually happen at the same time in almost all cases. So being able to move with it. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you. It's my sincere pleasure.
Hopefully we can have you back sometime because this is all moving fast.
I'd be happy to do it. So thank you, and thank you, Jackie.
Thank you also to our studio audience for coming in and asking questions. And we will be back again in another 2 weeks with another podcast. I'm not sure if that one is Scott or not, but he's coming back soon. We also have a class starting AI for filmmakers on Sunday, talking about education being important. We have a class starting on Sunday. It's live. I'm teaching it and look forward to welcoming all the people who are coming to lean into it.
Excellent. Very important. I'm glad you're doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it a lot. I love teaching, and it's a great way to connect with people and figure it all out together. All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you again, Ed, for being on the show.
Pleasure. Okay.
Take care, everybody. Go out.
Okay.
Learn and make things, and we'll see you all soon.
Excellent.